All right. Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Guillermo here with Dana Dunford from Hemlane. If you're at AIM this past spring, you may have gotten a chance to see Dana chat about AI, simplification, and property management systems. And I was really impressed with the conversation that you brought to the table in a lovely environment. Especially, I thought it was, we'll get into a little bit here, but really provocative in terms of like the old way of doing things with respect to the architecture of existing PMS alternatives and what you guys are bringing to the table from the Hemline side of things. Super, super exciting to hear and see you chat. As everybody always listens to, if you listen to the show very often, we talk about getting to LES here. And a getting to LES buyer that we seek to learn about is one that's, they've already realized they've got a problem. They're seeking to solve problems that in terms of how they articulate it. And the challenge of finding a LES buyer is that we have to respect the fact that they're on their own journey, and and as sellers, we need to be able to find them and engage with them at the right time when they're ready for change. And that in itself is a bit of an artwork. And so it's interesting to have these conversations with everybody. This is pre-recorded. Dana and I are doing this because we're both heading on PTO, and we want to get this out of the way and get this launched so that we have something out there to share while we're out doing our thing and rejuvenating ourselves. As always, this is brought to you by IRCX. IRCX is AI telemaintenance software for property management. We help you solve triage trips and turns. And as we always ask the show, and this is super interesting given your background, Dana, tell me a little bit about yourself, about your background, how you got in this role, and ultimately the problem you solve at Hemlane.
Yeah, hopefully this doesn't take too long. And thanks so much for having me on the show. Why I say hopefully it doesn't take too long is that it wasn't like I was in a family of real estate or a real estate company that led me to start and found Hemlane. Really, it just kind of came across. I think it's one of those things you never know what your career journey is going to be. And I say 50% of it is just freaking hard work of just grinding. The other 50% is just luck of where you were, right place, right time. Mm-hmm. So it started back in 2009. My older sister started investing in real estate. It was a great time to invest because of where foreclosures were. And then interest rates obviously were softening. And so she started picking up properties with her husband. And that led me to be very interested in, what are you guys doing? I work all the time, which means I save money and I don't spend it. If you're in the office every night until 2 a.m. and you spend your weekends in your office, by virtue of that, you save a lot of money. If I can give anyone tips in their early 20s, just do that. And
just work all the time.
Just work all the time.
Perfect.
And exactly. And so what ended up happening was I got interested and started investing in real estate as well. And what I found was real estate is a great way to build passive income over time, but more so for me, it was control. If I put my money in the stock market, which by the way, buying real estate, and then also back in, I think it was 2009. No, it was right before that, 2007, Facebook IPO'd. And I called, I was still a student in college, but I had a wealth manager because I had worked throughout college, so I'd saved some money. And I told him, put $10,000 into Facebook. And he said, great, like the day it IPO'd. And that $10,000, I think, went to like $2,000 the next day. And it was one of the worst IPOs possible. And I was so upset. And then I realized, gosh, that was probably one of the best lessons learned. I want to be able to control what I put money in. And if the stock market goes down 10%, I still, having a physical asset, whether it's a multifamily, a fourplex, a 20 unit, or even just a single family home, at least I control it. And if something goes wrong because a tenant is not paying rent or something like that, that's my own fault. That's not someone else's. So I got very interested in real estate. At the same time, I was in the tech scene in Silicon Valley. I'd been working at Apple. I had a fun job there. I loved it. That kind of led me to, when I was in business school, I got an internship at Nest, which was home technology. And that got me really excited about kind of the future of this passion for real estate, and then being able to manage your property from anywhere. And so kind of the parallel that I drew was I was at Nest. I was just an intern, a business school intern. So, bottom of the totem pole. And I noticed I have this technology in my hand, and I can literally view everything going on with my primary residence. Backyard, if I'm out of town for a month, I can make sure that there's no break-ins, everything looks fine, etc. I can control my thermostat. So much more goes into it. Your front door code, give people access. I said, I'm so lost with my rental properties. Like literally, I have no idea what's going on with them. And you can't put cameras into them. Tenants will not like that. Mm-hmm. But I said, there should still be the same concept of transparency and trust in the industry. And so how do we build a platform where you can own and operate rental properties and have that full transparency into what's going on without having to do much of the work? And so that really led to Hemlane. Now, would I have ever started the company without a good team? Absolutely not. So I think that's where luck comes in, where I found other landlords. They were super passionate. We started a company that led to what Hemlane is today. And so I think part of it is just freaking hard work. You work around the clock. And then the other half is like being at the right place at the right time and meeting the right people.
Yeah. And for Hemlane, like of the things that you guys solve for, like what's the principal problem you guys seek to relieve your customers of?
Yeah. Well, when you think of our North Star, let me back up and just say what our North Star is. It's the North Star of the company is occupied rental units. So a tenant in the property paying rent. So if you're paying us to use Hemlane, but you don't have a tenant in your property, you're not making any income. And so that is not to us a property that we would consider going towards our North Star goal. Okay. And so when you have that as your goal, then you can say, what do you offer to those who own and operate and manage rental properties? It's very easy. It is, we go ahead and provide you 100% transparency into what's going on, and we help mitigate your risk and put basically any property management software on steroids. And what I mean by that is a lot of softwares are like, oh yeah, well, he'll do a couple of things for you, but then their incentives don't become aligned. They start upcharging on a lot of things. They will, like, for example, most softwares out there charge tenants $2 to collect rent online per month. Well, then a tenant is just going to send you a check in the mail. It might get delayed. That might hold up a notice being sent. Like the incentives are totally misaligned with every other platform that I see out there. And so what we wanted to do was be able to control it. No, tenants pay. They're incentivized to pay online. By law, they're not required to pay online, but they're incentivized to pay online. That way, if you don't get the rent on the 1st of the month, we start mediation and notices on the 5th of the month, and boom, 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 boom. We're moving things forward so that you can sit back and relax and not say, oh, it's the 10th of the month. Where's my rent? And so trying to make it more passive for you is really that kind of property management software on steroids that I mentioned.
And so interesting. So like the people that care the most about that, because other, a lot of companies have APMs, they've got PMs, they've got, leasing agents. Like those are the ones they're structured to manage that. And that's that delinquency scenario that you just shared there. What makes Hemlane different, or who do you solve that? Who's that important to?
Yeah. So from who is our customer, you can be a landlord. You could also be managing someone else's properties. We see owner operators bring someone in to manage it. However, for us, what we found is the only way to really help control the outcome is to control the experience. And so what I mean by that is like most owner operators get it wrong. They hire a property manager who is local, who then hires a ton of people. They're trying to train one person on how to write lease agreements. They're trying to train one other person on how to do repair coordination, which, by the way, is a 24/7 job. Then they're trying to hire another person to do their accounting. Everything is a kind of shit show all over the place. We don't care if you're the PM or the owner. There's more owner operators out there because 72% of people self-manage their properties. We don't care. We just say, come to us and we will give you that peace of mind. So if you're the broker, owner operator on the ground, you don't have to think about managing, hiring, training, and firing and promoting a repair coordinator. We're going to do all of that for you. What we care about is you're on the ground, checking out those properties, driving by, checking the rehabs, building your business, whatever it may be. But we have a very streamlined process end to end to say, this is how you're going to increase your cash flow and also increase tenant satisfaction, which is very hard to do because a lot of companies will do one or the other well, but they don't get both right.
Yeah. And I actually was at NA last week and we tripped on that conversation a number of times. And even we had a panel 2 weeks ago around like the conversation of centralization or resident satisfaction, like choose one. It's kind of like the old way of doing things feels like you have to choose one, but there are alternatives today where you can have it both ways. Otherwise, we're not making progress here.
Exactly. Yes. And you can have it both ways. You need to make sure that you provide a delightful experience for tenants, but you also over communicate to them so they understand right when they sign that contract exactly what the terms are, how everything's going to work, and make sure they have a delightful experience and understand if they are in the wrong. For example, they don't show up and a service professional is there, they will be charged for that service call. Those types of things of making sure that you have that transparency and communication.
And how do you guys like this sounds magical, right? Given the alternatives that are out there and the way things are done today. Are you guys both the software and the service, or just the software, or how does that work?
We do service that we can guarantee it's a consistent process with 5-star reviews. If it's not a consistent process and it's some sort of one-off thing that you do specifically in your region, in your location, we will not do that. So we will basically have a standard playbook. It does about 80% of what you need. The other 20% falls on you. And that's the stuff that may be inconsistent. Let me give you an example. We could do repairs very well. We can do standard turns very well. New flooring, paint the walls, deep clean, that stuff we can do fine. If you ask for a kitchen remodel, that is not something we can do at scale. In fact, I don't know any company nationwide, tech company, that can do that at scale because there's not a consistent process. You're checking what kind of tiles you want and where the kitchen stove goes and this and that. It's not consistent and it's not our focus. And so we'll do majority of it and then say, here are the things that you're going to have to do or hire a third party to do. And, all of our clients are actually appreciative of that because we don't oversell ourselves and then underdeliver.
So when you start looking at the market, I mean, you mentioned like the 72% are self-managed of the owner of the property manager or the property owners out there. Like what does that look like? Like, I mean, in terms of like the tail, like what is the distribution with respect to number of units that are owned of the other owners that are out there? Because there's also the other argument we're hearing is that more and more people are shifting to third-party management. So like now, let's be clear. Like if you take the top 3 in the US right now, that's like 4% of the whole market that is self-managed, that is managed by the big 3. And so like, what's that look like? Because we often talk about the big 3, the big 5, the top 50. But there's the whole market out there. Feels like we're just scooping pails out of the Pacific sometimes.
Yeah. REITs are less than 15% of the market. They talk about institutional investors. Wall Street Journal loves talking about it. Wall Street Journal will say, institutional investors going into single family homes. Yeah. But when you actually look at it, there's 16 million single family homes in the United States. Institutional investors are only 300,000. So when they say they have, a 10% increase in what they've done, it's still not 400,000 of the 16 million renter households. Yeah. It's still a very fragmented market, and I don't think that will change. There's 19 million landlords out there. There's 44 million renter households. Of the 19 million landlords, the average number of units is anywhere between 2 to 4. But what you see is there's very few that have between 5 to 20 doors. You typically see that it's 1, 2 doors, accidental landlords, or someone who's very strategic, who has a lot more doors. That kind of market of folks who own 4 to 20 rentals, they make about $5,000 a month on it and can retire, is actually a very rare subset of the market. And our goal is actually to increase it, to give that financial freedom to many more people, because we've given them access to an asset class that they may not otherwise have.
Because you can get in early with lower barriers to entry, because you can leverage, because that is accessible. Because the fact that there are people that have 2 to 4 units is evidence that you can get in there with, like, on a salaried income, and then start enjoying the benefits of the rental appreciation that you talked about, that you're experiencing and your sister's experiencing, get the chance to work every day. And then, with those opportunities comes the constraints of operating them, because ultimately there's someone in there, there's moving parts. And so your software is going to enable those 2 to 4s to become 10 to 50s, 10 to 1,000.
If you make it easier for them to manage their properties, they will buy more. But the reason, typically what happens is the gateway drug of buying one property ends up in a sale and says, I don't want any more of this drug. Like, this is too much work for me. But by us making it easier for them, they say, oh, great. You know what? From this platform, I could go get a property in Jackson, Mississippi, or in Muncie, Indiana. I'm really interested in these markets. And, we're not on the buy-sell side because we don't want, our focus is property management, because we want to be very aligned with our customer of, like, not have reverse incentives of trying to get them to sell to make more money. We are totally focused on property management. And brokers and agents who use Hemlane actually appreciate that as well. But if we can make it so easy for them to manage their properties and become more passive and give them more insights, they will purchase more. They'll see it in their bottom line. And then the other thing you have to do to some extent is educate them on their taxes. So next time they talk to their accountant, there's so many tax incentives that go into owning real estate. And so why not go and purchase more? My husband was a perfect example. He was like, why would we put any money into real estate when we could just put it into all these startups before IPO? And then it's funny because now he always comes to me and is like, when are we buying our next property? Because I just showed him the numbers and showed him how passive it is. And he barely does anything. And he makes rental income every day and he enjoys it. And he gets a bit of appreciation off of it and all the tax benefits. And so I think that changing the mindset of everyone immediately is not going to happen, but it's almost this snowball effect where it starts to surface and you get more people passionate about real estate and providing a home for others. Yeah.
I mean, and there's also an inevitability that there is something that has to be done from the housing crisis perspective to enable more units to be constructed, built, commissioned and occupied, and make it more available for everybody to live in, right?
Yeah, there's 2 things that go into the affordability crisis. One is transportation. There's where most of the affordability problems are in big cities. And transportation makes it really incredibly difficult to say, I live an hour and a half outside of the city and commute in. So that's the first one. The second is just build more housing. I actually get really upset with lawmakers when they're like, oh, we have an affordability crisis. This is landlords' problem. Well, in most of these cities, purchase to rent ratios are higher than anywhere else. So the rental rate compared to the living rate in a primary residence that you own is actually a lot cheaper. So it's not the landlord's fault. It's actually legislation and the policymakers' fault. And they're just trying to deflect blame because they just need to build more housing and we need to get more people excited about rentals. Today, what you see is people don't, because it's so challenging to be a landlord that a lot of these developers are like, we're just going to build condos. We're not even going to build an apartment complex. And that is a huge problem with affordability and something I'm super passionate about of you need to help educate and help people understand what is really going to be the lever to make living more affordable and not have people spending 50% of their income on their rent, because I think that is just cruel and not the way things should be done.
It's really kind of like, it's beautiful how you're making it like there's a bit of a virtuous circle here from your like mission statement is that you guys want to make it affordable, easier to invest and provide housing, like easier to invest and create rental properties or manage rental properties, those that can. And because that's possible, they'll buy more. And because that's possible, there'll be more housing available.
Yeah, exactly. More people will be interested in it. There's more demand going into it. Today, you don't have that. And another thing that I'm passionate about, which has nothing to do with Hemlane right now, but I think AI can get us there, is how do you actually help the tenants more? Yep. How do you make them financially stable? And I think a lot of landlords have a bad rep of like huge late fees, this and that, tenants living paycheck to paycheck, tenants paying with their credit card. The other cool thing is how do you make them where they're so financially stable that even the landlord has even more confidence because they know the tenant's not paying with a credit card or anything that may catch up in the end and be bad for both the tenant and the landlord. I think, they don't teach you in high school. You don't have a finance course on how to manage personal finances. And so if anyone needs to do that for the next generation and those who are in rental properties, it's going to be a company like us.
That's so noble. So when you look at what you're describing to me from a buyer, doesn't sound like your typical institutional buyer. So is that your kind of hell yes buyer, or someone who is in control of it's their money, not institutional money?
So here's the reason we don't go after institutional buyers. One, they have their own tools, their own processes. And honestly, I don't think that's where you're going to get innovation and disruption at all. I don't think that's it. You need to start with the mass market and say, in the mass market, an institutional investor is very much just looking at their P&L. And they're very much looking at this quarter's results and next quarter's results. And anything innovative, they may take a chance on. They're probably just going to follow the standard traditional process. When you see a lot of digital disruption, and this is the digital disruption curve that Clay Christensen talks about, you don't start with the top institutional investors. You start with the small mom and pop who have nothing. You show them how amazing it is. Then you add more on for them. And then suddenly institutionals are like, what is this? What kind of AI are they using? How did they just change this process? But if you start at the top, you don't build anything innovative. And I think that's been the problem in prop tech and property management tech is every single other prop tech company in property management I've seen, they will pitch investors. We layer technology onto the existing industry.
So then so one of the things that we found in trying to find, let's say, explain the mini mills or the mom and pops, they're very hard to find. It's easy to find the institutionals because they're public listed, they're on ALN, they're on CoStar, they're all these places. How are you finding your hell yes buyers?
Do you want to hear how I found my first 100?
Well, let's do it.
Okay.
Yes.
So I believe if you have a great product, word of mouth will just continue. People will say, I can't believe you still manage your rental property this way. Have you ever tried Hemlane? Just go on for 2 seconds and they've got a free trial, a free plan, and then you get people addicted to it. But before that, when our product was not as good as it is, you know how when you launch your first product, you should actually be very embarrassed by it. So I went on to LinkedIn. I don't know if this still exists. I went on to LinkedIn and I have over, I think, 5,000 connections. And there's an export button where you can export all of your contacts and it will give you their email address, their phone number, who they are, their position and title, company. So then I wrote a template and it was just in Google Sheets. It was a concatenate where it was if they worked at Apple with me, mention something about Apple as the first line. And then the paragraph preceding it is, I just started working on a company in property management for people who own, and it started with people who just owned 1 to 20 rental properties.
Yeah.
I love, and I never actually sold them. I never said do you or anyone want to use Hemlane. That was not my point of these calls. My point of these calls was to understand someone's pain point, and if I could solve it, then I would sell them.
Right.
I said, can you introduce me to any landlords you know, so I can learn more about what's going on and what could make their life easier?
Mm-hmm.
I got responses from people at Nest I worked at with who were like, oh yeah, I own 25 units in Santa Cruz. Let's jump on a call. People, I was like, I didn't even know you owned these rental properties. And so I got all these responses. Oh, I don't own rental properties, but the lady next door is moving and she's about to rent her place. Oh, I have this person. So I got this list out of the 5,000. And I think it came down to around 500 leads just based on people knowing someone.
Wow.
And then I would just go to them and I wouldn't sell them. I just said, this is what I'm doing. And my first big customer who he had 12 properties in 12 different states.
Yeah. So he had a problem.
He had a problem and he had a huge willingness to pay, because he was like, I don't want to deal with 12 different property managers. I want everything on one platform. And I told him, okay, well, this is what we have built. We have repair coordination, but I'm your repair coordinator and all of that. And what basically happened was those types of people helped us build the product. Mm-hmm. And because they were friends of friends, they were willing to give a chance. If they weren't friends of friends, they would have never done that. Me going to Facebook ads, social ads, I wouldn't have gotten someone on a call with it. And so this was really the way. And then I would just ask every single one. Once I knew they were happy, they gave us an NPS of 10. I'd say, do you have 5 more people you think I could talk to? Do you have 5 more people? And so I think it was like 5 years into it, they were our investors. And then we got investors. They were like, you don't even run any paid ads or meta ads. We are not running Google ads, paid Facebook ads. I said, no, I don't need to. I just talk to people all day. That's what I do. Yeah. And that was how we built it. And there were mistakes along the way. I think sometimes I focus too much on the experience, like, hey, go through my application process and tell me what you think of it. And they'd be like, oh, this button color needs to change. This needs to change. Yeah. And I realized I shouldn't get feedback on the product. What I need is just what's their problem. Yeah. And then do I think the product can solve it? And if I do, sell them right there. And then the other mistake I made initially, which I think we could have gotten to more customers and more revenue sooner, was I was selling a lot of them free right off the bat. Well, why don't you just go onto our free plan and we'll go from there? Yeah. Once I found their pain point, I would sell them on the product that they actually had to pay for and say, would you be interested in this and would you pay for this? If they weren't willing to pay for it, it was like, oh, I'm not building the right thing, or it's not really solving their pain point. And I'd have to go back and really understand what truly is their pain point.
It is. I think that there's, the thread here is that while you may be PLG now, and it feels like when you're getting referrals, that's product led, that's kind of like product validated, less than product led. Mm-hmm. And then you're still doing sales led along the way. Your sales led is bringing in and closing. Your product is keeping, right? And not churning. And then it's a combination of that service level that you're delivering and the product delivering on what it's doing to create an opportunity. It's really about creating opportunities for conversion versus creating conversions. Whereas product led will create the conversions, you're actually creating opportunities for conversions.
Yes.
You're asking for the referral. Like if you're asking for the referral, that's not product led.
Yeah. Well, right. And now that is product led, but at the beginning it wasn't, right? Yeah. At the beginning it wasn't. Now it's in the app, refer and earn, and that just builds it. But you're right, at the beginning, it's a little bit more of a personal touch. And then if anyone were to churn, I knew I could reach out to them and be like, hey, tell me why you stopped paying. Yeah. And a lot of times if you have them fill out a survey or check a box, it's actually not the real reason they churned. You have to get off on a call and just be silent and just let them ramble. Because the more you let them ramble, the more you learn, oh, that's exactly why they didn't stay on. And then you go, okay, we got to fix that part of the product. And so you continue to do that until your retention is very strong. The observation that I like to shout out is just like, while we're building technology products, we're building things for people. And you have to talk to people, both on the sales side, hear their objections, hear their no's, hear their problems, hear their pains, hear their priorities. And then like everyone's saying pain first, but like the pain can exist and not be a part of their priority list. Mhm.
right? And then you got the on the churn side of things, when they churn, how they churn. Like I remember listening to like Mark Roberts from Stage 2 and HubSpot talking about like, you should your first when you're in PLG stage, and this makes me sick in the stomach. When you're in PLG stage, you should make your contracts 30-day exits. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so scary. Like once you've done all the work to get them, sign to a 1-year contract, like keep them for 1-year contract. But like he's like, yeah, give them 30, because you almost need to encourage the churn.
Yeah.
It sounds counterproductive because you need to get those no's. You need to get those exit interviews. Ideally, you don't, but like it's dangerous if you don't, because you're not.
Yeah.
You may have you may have just a whole bunch of early innovators that are buyers they'll just live with any sort of pain, but ultimately you can't get across that chasm if you haven't had enough no's and churn.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I'm so glad you brought up annual contracts. Klaviyo's CEO is huge on this as well, of saying don't lock people into annual contracts. That is just saying that you have a product that you don't think is superior in the market. And if it's not, go freaking build it. Yeah. And that is where I totally agree of like locking people into these annual contracts is not the right mentality or attitude. It's just a lot more administration. People are then waiting for that day. They're going to churn anyway. Go solve the problem and feel the pain up front and build the best product on market.
It's one of those truisms that are so hard to accept. Mm-hmm. Because you can't do that unless there's just so many conditions that you feel needs to pre-exist before you can allow that to happen. Because once you have it, like, you go raise money, they want to see that everything's in a contract. They don't want to see that everything's on 30 days, Yeah. It's like, that's the balance that if they're on 30 days, but they haven't churned in 4 years, or they're, specifically the usage is high or arcing upwards, or you've introduced new products and here's the uptake of the new product, then you can kind of defend the fact that you're on 30-day contracts, but it still doesn't feel great, even though it's like eating your veggies, right? It's tough. It's a tough truism.
Yeah. You need to show your MRR retention is above 100%, that your current customers are bringing more on, spending more money, and you're making more off of them than you're losing. And then suddenly it's a showstop. You never have an investor push back on you or anything like that. The other thing I would say is really make sure that when you're talking to customers, you're solving their pain point, but you're not necessarily building exactly what they want. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, and the reason I bring that up is a lot of them are not on the forefront of tech. And if you are, like we were just talking about this with Hemlane, they want an app. They want a standard enterprise, boring.
They want an easy button.
Yeah. And so that they can go on and use an app. But if you think of the future of apps, like I actually think the enterprise apps that were built today or any of our competitor apps will be dead, because every interface is just going to be like ChatGPT, where you're just typing in a question. Hey, I want to pay my rent. Okay, great. How much do you want to pay? When do you want to pay it on? I want to pay it today from my Bank of America account. Okay, done. It's all done. I've just done that for you. You're going to have a totally different interface that is not as antiquated as what we've seen. And so a lot of times when customers ask for something, the big thing you have to ask is like, okay, this is the problem they want. They want something easy, but maybe I shouldn't build what they want. And so I think it's just really important to also keep that of customer feedback versus how you build it. As long as you solve their pain point, if it's a better way, do it your way, don't do it their way.
So how do you like to tease this? I agree 100%. I lived a life in sort of in solution delivery where a customer would come to you with what they want, and you deliver to them, and then they hate it. And so, like even integrations, we get questions. Hey, do you integrate the RD? So yeah, sure. But like, let's figure out what that integration looks like after 90 days. Because we could put a whole bunch of blood, sweat, and tears into the RD integration with your team and our team, and then realize that's actually not what you want, right?
Yeah.
And I'm finding that. So how do you tease it out? That's an example, but how do you tease it out to figure out what's the real problem they're trying to solve?
Well, I listen to them of what their problem is. And if they say, let's just say, I want an app for tenants, right? It's okay. What feedback are you getting from tenants where they need an app, right? Oh, they need to make it easy to pay their rent on their phone, and they're finding it cumbersome right now. Mm-hmm. that's all you need to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, okay, now I just need to make it easy for them to click a pay button.
Mm-hmm.
Or click the auto pay button or whatever it is. And then you have to go through the stuff that I call boring, which is legal and finance, to say, like, legally, could you just have them press the one button? Do you remember when Venmo would do that? You get a text and it said, like, press one to pay, and then pay. And it was delightful. You didn't have to go into any app. So I think being able to understand what are they trying to do, and then say, okay, great, I may not build it how you want it to be built, but it's going to be better than what you dreamed to build. Yeah. And then that's typically our design and product team that come up with the innovation to say, this is a new, better way to build it.
What we seek to understand, or at least what adds clarity to the conversation, is what's the problem you're trying to solve, but then how will you measure success? Because when they start articulating how they measure success, then they kind of start really deliberating on what the problem is and the impact that it's causing their business or their part of that business. And they divorce themselves from the idea of what they may have preconceived to be the solution. And they start opening their mind to other solutions. Because then you can say, well, what if we could do better than that? Well, I love that. Okay, perfect. Well, here's how we do it differently, right? Just had a call right now where they came in, hey, I need these things. And I said, okay, why do you need those things? Like, well, because we have a hard time doing it over the phone. I said, well, what if you could see? Like, oh, well, you never thought about that. Well, that changes everything. Okay. Well, now that you can see the problem, is like real-time translation over the phone like really going to solve the problem? Or is it better to say, turn left? Have you ever been in a Mexican restaurant and no one speaks English? Like, how did you order the food there? Like, what did you do? Right? You got through it, you figured it out. And so, and the server worked with you. Like, it's like, there are ways to solve these problems that are beyond what may be obvious, in addition to the fact that the customers, and I'll actually say, as a CEO, I'm the least qualified to predict to articulate the solution. I want to make sure, and so to my product team, and much less is the customer qualified to tell me how the problem should be solved. I want to know what the problem is. Let me interpret that, clarify, talk to the product team, come back with an offer, and let me know if that offer fits.
Yeah.
And give you a chance to counter. Because like, if we can land the plane on what the problem is, improve the results that you're seeking to achieve through, door number 2, then that's going to be pretty good. And
exactly.
It's interesting to have those conversations, because that's where I find, like, this morning we had wow conversations. And when someone was like, wow, and then you're kind of like, what, another feature, and they're like, wow, and then another feature, and they're like, oh my God, and then another feature, you're like, wow. And like, okay, that's 4 wows, that's plenty for today. I can't keep layering on, right? and those wows to start, like, you just get excited because you're like, as a founder, we're constantly in this insecurity complex of like, am I doing the right thing with my time on earth? And they're like, when the customer's giving you those wows, you're like, okay, there's affirmation. This is something we're solving. This is addressing the problem they're seeking to solve.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think they don't have to know how you solve it. They don't even have to know what's going on the back end. Like, they don't have to know if the person talking to you is centralized, decentralized, where they're located, anything. All they have to know is this solved my problem. And precisely. All the details are, internally. It's like Amazon, 2-day delivery. You don't know how they do it. You don't know who they're using on Christmas Eve to get your package to you in 2 days. It could be a high schooler. I don't know. But it gets to you within 2 days. And so you kind of don't actually really care about the process at all.
Well, that's I had an expression tell me long ago, one of my mentors is like, you never want to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You just want to enjoy it, right? And so that's kind of the things that we I agree. And so if we can get to that point, open their eyes, bring them along, then they're bought in. Now, the other problem we always have to deal with as sellers is around. I landed on this expression on a show with Joe Summers. Conventionally, we think about creating urgency, right? But it seems as though better language is capturing urgency. What do you think about that?
Well, I think capturing is very similar how I personally do sales. I'm terrible at sales, by the way. But I actually don't like to sell people. I like to make it their decision. Mm-hmm. So it has to be their urgency or their decision. They have to come to the realization that they need this right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a capturing versus this creating urgency of really trying to push it versus them internalizing, I need this right now and I am going to jump through and do it. It actually makes the sale a lot easier because there's not a lot of follow-ups. There's not a lot of drop-off. It's this person has come to the realization they need this and they need this right now. Now it's how you structure the questions. It's what you know. The more you learn about the person, the more you'll understand how do you basically capture that urgency.
And I find that the challenge that can be with capturing urgency is that there's a timing element to it in terms of like, there's all these prospects out there and they're all at different stages of understanding of their buyer's journey. And how do you get in touch with them? So how do you get in touch with them, or how do you stay in touch or remain relevant with them during their buyer's journey, even if they're not even at the awareness stage?
Well, it depends. So in SMB, where we are, customer acquisition cost is where you go to die. So you need a really strong marketing team that is blasting out content that would be helpful for anyone. But when you have someone who's in the potential awareness state, not ready quite yet to convert, you need to understand on that first call, which should only be 5 minutes, when should I be following up with this person? So, oh, great, I've just signed up with a property manager, not sure if I'll like them, contract's up in May. Great. Next May. Great. Follow up with them in April. Right. And maybe drop them something before that 2 months beforehand, just to get that awareness back. I think really understanding as much about them off the bat and then personalizing that will close your sales cycle, not from the length, but from the duration you spend on it. Because the more you know, the more you can go into 1 call, 2 call closes, which is actually what our team does. Is every call needs to be a 1 or 2 call close. It should not be drowned out to multiple. But I think a lot of salespeople will get on and then someone says, oh, I'm not interested. I think it's too expensive, or I don't need it, or I'm looking for something more full service. Then the question is like, why? What are you worried about the product? What is that? The more you learn from the person, the more you can get to that close in your second, third conversation. It shouldn't take more than that. At least in SMB sales. I think enterprise is slightly different.
Well, it's interesting. It is, but I find that especially when you start hearing the objections, if you've entered the conversation with the context of we're here to help, not we're here to get you to buy, you've earned the right to ask those questions. Like, totally. Deal falls out in the lot, closed, lost. Hey, I'm just curious. I mean, I know this was a priority when we first chatted, and now, did you make another choice? Did you choose to do nothing? Why is it, why are we not meeting? Why are, we're choosing to not do anything right now or whatever? Why did the status quo persist? I'm really curious to hear that for our own learning. And, if you enter that with conversation from a position of curiosity, people are very helpful. They're conscientious of the effort they put into the deal, and they're willing to respond. And it's just like, and then sometimes when you go and ask for the debrief, they actually say, maybe we should reconsider this. That happens too.
And if they don't if they don't want it, then all of the questions that finally got to you to the no, and maybe this is just not your target customer. Right. Make sure then revise your sales script to ask those earlier on, so you don't have to drown it out as much, and really pre-qualify based on who your target customer is. Yep. It's about the data. Yeah. And I find right now a really big help is the fact that all these calls are in video. They're all typically recorded, and you can chuck all that into GPT and start asking GPT the questions for you. Right. Rather than kind of burning cycles listening to calls, you can put the transcripts in, and then you can get GPT to help you out. Yeah. I mean, well, once you have ChatGPT or whatever you're using for AI, if it's recording everything you do, it will soon, and we're not there. I think AGI, they say it's like in 2030 is when we will be there. They're going to actually start structuring and changing things for you and thinking of like, how would I get to that close faster and actually help you with it, which I think is very exciting. I mean, from a tech perspective, we're in one of the most transformative times since the founding of the internet. I can't think of something as momentous as this. Yeah, I would say high-speed broadband.
But the
Okay.
internet,
Yeah.
dial-up was kind of interesting, but high speed is when everything changed.
Yeah. Okay. So internet, then high speed, now AI.
Yeah, like my moment of the internet inflection point was like the YouTube moment. Like when we could start watching videos, like literally cat videos online is what changed everything. Because it was like we're able to see what I can get this anytime, anywhere.
Yeah,
and that was a real change, right? And you consider about the bandwidth required to do all of that, the processing, the search, like between search, like just YouTube itself, the search, the distribution, the content management, the monetization models, like all that happened in a single moment with a single product, and really changed the way that we operate day to day. When you guys are out there in the market and you're talking, you mentioned a little about this earlier, you're thinking about objections. What kind of objections do you guys hear?
Depends on who the customer is, right? If they are, if they're a DIY landlord who has no software service, they actually would prefer to pay nothing, like zero willingness to pay. And they would rather spend every month checking their bank statement to confirm the tenant paid the full amount, not a partial amount or not anything. Give the tenant access to their cell phone, give the tenant access to email, have the tenant message them everything. What they don't realize is they're losing more money, because even if you're using our starter plan for like the cheapest ever, $30 a month, you spend more than $30 a month in time from leasing to having a tenant in the property. And you're actually going to lose money on your turnover costs. You're going to lose more money on your renewals. Like there's all of that goes into it. Again, that can't be our decision. They have to see that themselves and see that, hey, Hemlane would have gotten me a better rental rate. Hemlane would have made it where when the tenant moved out, they had a professional move-in inspection. Like we need to actually show that to them and make it their decision. If it's someone who's using a full service manager, it's very important not to oversell. Here is what Hemlane has. Your things aren't working out with your property manager, maybe because it's not transparent. They're using a shitty software, all the softwares out there that were built, 20 years ago, and nothing's transparent to you. There's surprises. You just get a bill at the end of the month. All the repairs seem really high. You're always questioning them. Great. Here's what Hemlane can do. Now here's the 10% we can't do, but here's why it's better for you to do it. Do you agree with us on that? And so those are kind of from those. And then for those that are brokerages that want to partner with us, those are usually the easiest because they see the value in partnering with us and really leveling things up for their customers than they otherwise would. And then they can solve that extra 10% for their clients.
Is that a distribution channel for you guys?
So it is. It's definitely a distribution channel. We try to be pretty exclusive, with which brokerages we work with. We don't want 10 in any area. We want only one. We want the best one. We don't want to work with everyone. We just like our team. I always tell people, if you apply to Hemlane, you're one of 90 for that position, and you'll be lucky if you get to the second round interview. We try to do the same thing with the brokerage side. Very
cool. Going back in your time and your experience, your career, and maybe even or maybe folks that are joining Hemlane, what's the one piece of advice you like to offer or live by for either yourself or someone who's coming to join on, for someone to stick with them, to keep doing?
Yeah. If you're doing it for the money or you're doing it to say you work at a startup, you're doing it for the wrong reason. I truly believe that you have to be passionate about what you're building. Any company has almost this cult-like experience. Like any strong startup has almost like a cult-like following where everyone loves it. They live by it. They breathe by it. So if you don't feel that way about what we're building or what we're doing, and you're not ready to put in the long hours and really innovate and buckle down, our startup's not right for you, but maybe no startup's right for you. If you just want to go make money and kind of work a 9 to 5, go to some corporate company that never changes and hasn't changed over 20 years. Some, consumer good company like a PepsiCo, go work there.
There is the filter. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. Who should we talk to next?
Gosh, for this, I've got a lot of people for you to talk to. But I think the coolest may be someone on the how do you purchase rental properties. So I can give you like Andrew at Doorvest. They've done various different things there. So I can give you a couple of folks there. I'd say Zach with Rent to Retirement as well.
Okay, Zach with Rent to Retirement. Got it. Cool. How can people get a hold of you?
You can go ahead and actually, I'm very good with email, dana@hemlane.com, or you can go to my LinkedIn or my Twitter.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was there's tons of good nuggets in here to pull from. Appreciate the story that we're digging in on this founder side with respect to building out that 0 to 1. We don't get to talk about that very often. And of course, when you're going through it or when you live in it or when you've lived it, there's certain things that are different at that stage than when you're getting into the scale stage. And it's not written or talked about enough because revisionist history is like very perfect. And I think we forget about some of those tough days. So that's awesome for you to share that. For everyone listening, again, if you're listening to this later, add comments. Dana and I'll both get notifications and we'll get to them. If you're catching this in the podcast, subscribe. It's always helpful for people to help find the podcast and respect to how to learn how to get to hell yes. And then any comments or any things you have with respect to the podcast, just jump it on there, put it on LinkedIn, and we'll get to it. Again, this is always brought to you by IRCX. We're AI-powered telemaintenance software helping with turns, triage, and trips. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Dana, thank you so much for your input and feedback at AIM. And I thought it was an awesome presentation. Again, the conversation today and all our conversations in between have been super, super valuable. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right.